While a wave of protests against immigrants was raging across Europe, it seemed that the fire of anger and the chain of anxiety would have no end. One after another, demonstrations and riots flared up, tearing society apart and shrouding it in a fog of mistrust. Cold, scrutinizing gazes were directed at anyone crossing the border, sowing an atmosphere of extreme tension. However, in one city in the Netherlands, something so striking occurred that it was hard to believe. More than 650,000 people gathered together, making the entire city shudder in an atmosphere of euphoria. At the center of this event, strangely enough, was the Canadian community. In conditions where anti-immigrant sentiments were becoming increasingly overt, only they received a special welcome. The Dutch declared with one voice, "On this land, except for Canadians, we do not trust anyone." A shock, overturning all habitual perceptions, rolled across the entire world. People could not believe what was happening. In the end, why exactly were Canadians honored with such special treatment? What surprising truth was hidden behind this? The flame of anger and the chain of anxiety on the streets. For many days in a row, the streets of the Netherlands were shaken by protests against immigrants. People raised banners, shouting slogans in fury. Amidst the chaotic crowd, someone rocked cars, and some even threw stones, turning processions into violence. The wave of unrest eventually reached tourist areas, dragging even tourists visiting Amsterdam into the chaos. France was no exception. In Paris and Brussels, riots flared up one after another, and Molotov cocktails painted the night streets in a crimson color. Fierce clashes between youth and police constantly occupied the front pages of newspapers. In the back alleys, shops were smashed, testifying to the boiling anger of the people. Citizens shouted that immigration policy was destroying their country. Social instability had reached its peak. In the Netherlands, the situation was also extremely serious. In Amsterdam and The Hague, massive demonstrations were repeated. Thousands of people gathered in the square before the central station, chanting, "We don't need immigrants." Dark banners fluttered in the wind. Riot police lined up in rows with shields, ready to use tear gas. The atmosphere at the scene was saturated with tension, ready to explode at any moment. Passers-by hurried past. Footage of mothers hugging their children on television screens conveyed anxiety and fatigue into every home. All of Europe was gripped by a chain of anxiety and hostility. Economic stagnation, deteriorating security, rising unemployment. All this was blamed on the problem of immigration, leading to a deep split in society. The voices of politicians calling to accept immigrants became weaker and weaker. Extremist groups operated everywhere, pointing to a burning Europe. The sole exception. However, on this agitated and restless European continent, there was one city remarkably different from the others. Rotterdam, located in the south of the Netherlands. Immigrants and foreign workers lived here too. But for some reason, the tense atmosphere that reigned in Amsterdam or The Hague was completely unfelt. In the evening, cheerful laughter still rang out on the shopping street. People stood calmly in lines at bakeries. Lively conversations continued on the terraces of cafes. There were no protest signs to be seen, nor squads of police ready for battle. Faced with the chaos on TV screens and the peaceful life before their eyes, those who came to this city for the first time felt confused. Why was everything different only here? Local media also reported that Rotterdam was an exception. A large number of foreigners resided in the city, but serious clashes practically did not occur. No protest slogans were heard. No scenes involved in riots were seen. Behind this background lay a mystery that could not be explained by statistics or politics. While all of Europe plunged into crisis, Rotterdam maintained calm, as if it belonged to another world. Unraveling this mystery became the beginning of the story. The influence of a small Canadian community. When the uniqueness of Rotterdam began to attract attention, delegations from other cities were drawn to the city, one after another. Why in the same country did this place breathe completely differently? This riddle quickly attracted the interest of the entire Netherlands and the whole world. Posts like "Why hasn't security in Rotterdam collapsed?" spread widely on social media. The comment section was full of guesses. Although many assumed it was due to excellent security measures or a stable economy, the testimonies of local residents revealed an unexpected truth. The atmosphere of the city was changed by the existence of a small Canadian community. They made up only a small part of the population, about 10,000 people. Judging by the numbers, they shouldn't have had the strength to change an entire society. However, the reality was completely different. This modest presence exerted a quiet but sufficient influence to soothe the tense atmosphere of the entire city. One local resident shared, "They are very quiet and polite. But it's not just that. Their actions make you feel that they cherish this city very much." Another said, "They are not strangers. They are our partners." Why was such a small group able to win such huge trust? It was very difficult for outsiders to understand the reason. Soon, social media filled with surprised exclamations. "In the Netherlands, shaken by the immigration problem, why are only the Canadians different?" A phenomenon that could not be explained by small numbers imperceptibly stirred the minds of people around the world. Transformation from indifference to praise. When the uniqueness of Rotterdam began to attract attention, the initial reaction was indifference. Social media was full of criticism like, "Canadians are also immigrants. Immigrants are immigrants. In the end, they are all the same." Many objected to special treatment for them. Beneath controversial posts, many sarcastic emojis appeared, and ridicule spread across the network. However, the situation gradually changed when the Dutch actually living in Rotterdam began to speak up. "They are not foreign bodies. On the contrary, they enrich our lives." After the publication of these testimonies, the atmosphere on the network changed abruptly. The comment section filled with surprise and confusion. "Really?" Soon, voices saying, "I feel that way too," began to layer upon one another. Specific examples spread one after another. A Canadian family that moved next door spoke broken Dutch, but always greeted neighbors politely with a friendly "sorry" if they were even slightly in the way. Their children attending school were courteous and naturally helped friends who were in trouble. A shop owner recounted, "They don't just buy goods. When paying, they always thank you sincerely." That single word made me very happy. With the accumulation of these personal experiences, indifference gradually melted away. Even joking posts began to appear. If all immigrants were Canadian, there would be no problems. There were also more radical comments, such as, "Except for Canadians, let no one come." Former critical voices gradually disappeared. Of course, not everyone switched to praise. Skeptical opinions remained. But when testimonies from real experience on the ground received wide distribution, these objections lost their power. This change showed the enormous power that trust can bring, something that cannot be measured by numbers. From indifference to praise, the existence of just a few thousand people changed the discussion all over the world. Roots of trust, an era of economic connection. The beginning of this strange relationship can be traced back to the 1990s. Following global economic shifts, in the process of striving for economic development and industrial modernization, improving qualifications in the fields of information technology and engineering was considered an indispensable factor for building the future. Canada turned its attention to the Netherlands, a gateway to Europe, and especially to Rotterdam, a recognized industrial and logistical hub possessing advanced maritime and engineering technologies. Canada sent its engineers and developers here, striving to master the most advanced knowledge and technological secrets. They overcame the language barrier, worked tirelessly in production, and stubbornly held on to their places. Sometimes they were misunderstood. They faced difficulties. But they still humbly sought cooperation. At first, the local Dutch treated them with caution, and there were quite a few who did not welcome technicians from across the ocean. However, Seeing how the Canadians worked day and night, repeating experiments with blueprints again and again, a silent respect arose. One local master later recalled, "They didn't just work. They seemed to carry the future of their homeland and even the future of this city on their shoulders." Efforts grew, and this was not a short-term exchange. Soon, Canadian companies began to open their offices in Rotterdam, becoming part of the joint development with the city. The history here went beyond purely economic ties. It was a story of mutual learning and respect. Back then, no one could have guessed that these relationships would turn into a miracle that would shake the world 30 years later. Trust beyond numbers. The development of Canadian business. That small exchange imperceptibly turned into a big wave. The deep connection that began with technology spread over several decades to many spheres of the economy, turning Rotterdam into a major stronghold of Canadian business. Over time, Rotterdam became special. The city, which was once a place for learning technologies, quickly turned into a center uniting diverse industries such as green energy, logistics, and finance. Within a few decades, the number of companies with Canadian investments grew to more than 600. Usually, when so many foreign companies arrive, the emergence of conflicts or protests is inevitable. Concerns might arise like, "Won't they take our jobs?" or "Won't the character of the city suffer?" But in Rotterdam, on the contrary, the opinion spread. With Canadians, it is very peaceful. The reason lay not in some outstanding features, but in the manner of behavior of the Canadians, never imposing their own way, always prioritizing harmony with those around them. Whether in business activities or in life, they always maintained a modest and sincere attitude. In commercial deals, they valued building trust more than flashy advertising, and constantly made efforts to root themselves at the local level. One Dutch businessman said in an interview, "They don't put profit at the very top. They honor contracts, do not break promises, and accumulate credit of trust bit by bit. That is exactly why we are willing to cooperate with them." In everyday life, it was the same. Canadian families did not forget to greet neighbors and actively participated in community events. At festivals or neighborhood cleanups, they were not just invitees, but those who acted on their own initiative. Such an attitude cemented in people's minds the image of them as partners protecting the city together. The Canadian manner turned a wall of alienation into a bridge. Commercial activity did not divide the city, but on the contrary, became the basis for fostering trust and empathy. Rotterdam quickly established its solid status as a center of Canadian business in Europe. For local residents, it was not only an economic benefit, but also a sense of security from living alongside sincere neighbors. Trust, which cannot be measured by numerical values, became the key that made this city special. The miracle of fusion, the Canadian Cultural Festival. With the strengthening of economic ties, Rotterdam turned from a simple trading city into a center of cultural exchange. Usually, when a large amount of foreign culture suddenly flows in, it causes tension. But in this city, the fusion happened surprisingly naturally. The most striking example was the annual Canadian Cultural Festival. A multitude of people gathered on the square by the Maas River, and the entire city for one day immersed itself in Canadian culture. However, culture claiming superiority was not demonstrated here. In the tasting zone for maple syrup and pancakes, the Dutch also enjoyed the treats together. During the performance of folk music, they could easily invite you, "Now it's your turn to try." It was a place where boundaries between performers and spectators were erased, where everyone could enjoy themselves together. In culinary culture, similar scenes were observed. Poutine, a traditional dish, was served in a Dutch interpretation, sometimes with the addition of local smoked sausage or Gouda cheese. In a normal situation, such a scene would likely be rejected with the phrasing, "This is not Canadian culture." But the Canadians accepted it with a smile. They said, "That's an interesting idea." They not only protected their culture, but also created new forms with the locals with flexibility. This softness gradually opened the hearts of the Dutch. One Dutch woman said, Canadians always say, "Let's do it together." They do not impose their culture, but happily share it. Therefore, we can open up freely. This phrase found an echo on social media. The statement, "Only Canadians are the exception," was repeated again and again. In the urban landscape of Rotterdam, Canadian restaurants and bookshops fit in naturally, without creating a sense of rejection. A Canadian diner and a Dutch bakery recommended customers to each other. These accumulated little things fostered a sense of security that this is our shared city. While the problem of immigration split societies around the world, Rotterdam maintained its unique atmosphere. This was absolutely not the result of some special regime or policy. It happened because Canadians turned cultural differences from conflict into fusion, not denying each other, respecting each other, and enjoying together. Exactly this attitude allowed this city to be called a miraculous exception. Strong friendship during the storm. Proof of partnership. Was this cultural fusion reality? The test came a few years ago when the Canadian Rockies were seized by massive wildfires, causing a serious catastrophe. The city of Rotterdam united with Canada in an unexpected way. Footage of the fires flew around the world. Burnt forests, a sky clouded with smoke. Tragic scenes broadcast on TV caused a great shock to people far away in the Netherlands. For the Canadian community living in Rotterdam, that day also became unforgettable, a day when they shared the pain with their homeland. The next morning, an incredible picture appeared before the gates of the international school. Under heavy rain, a long line of Dutch people lined up. They held donation boxes, carried food and clothes. One trembling old man dropped a coin and said, "This is our gratitude." He explained that now was the time to return the kindness they had received for so long. Hearing these words, many Canadians could not hold back tears. The line of people did not end in one day, but spread throughout the city. Before churches, in shopping districts on the station square, fundraising campaigns were not by anyone's instruction, but spontaneous. The local press wrote, "All of Rotterdam has moved." On television, they showed footage of children carrying their small piggy banks. This spontaneous manifestation of solidarity became possible because the Canadians had imperceptibly accumulated trust in their daily lives. The residents of this city saw partners in the Canadians, not just foreigners. One young man commented on social media, "Canadians always silently did their duty. That is exactly why, when they are in trouble, we cannot stand aside." This phrase instantly spread, and the whole world was amazed by this incredible cohesion. This unprecedented natural disaster once again highlighted the bond built between Canada and Rotterdam. Trust nurtured bit by bit, time spent together, mutual care. All this manifested in a concrete form during the trial. The residents of the city began to realize that Canadians had gone beyond the concept of immigrants. They had become comrades with whom they live and build a future together. This was a truth revealed thanks to the catastrophe. Revelation without borders, commonality and future. After the catastrophe, the city's feelings toward Canada became even deeper. A few years later, an event called International Understanding Day was organized at a school in Rotterdam, the goal of which was for children from different countries to present their culture and learn about each other's differences. On stage, children in national costumes sang and danced, warming up the atmosphere in the hall. At that moment, an 8-year-old Canadian boy walked onto the podium alone. With his small figure, he took the microphone and uttered an unexpected phrase. Instead of talking about differences, let's look for what is common. At that moment, the entire hall fell silent. Teachers and parents held their breath. The boy, together with his friends, presented Canadian politeness going hand in hand with Dutch directness, Canadian diligence with the Dutch work ethic. They laughed and said, "Although the countries are different, there is much in common in true values." All eyes were fixed on them. Then they enthusiastically appealed, "Borders are not walls. They can become bridges." When the performance ended, the hall exploded with thunderous applause. Someone was moved to tears. Some parents sighed. I learned this from a child. This video quickly spread on social media, and praises poured in from all over the world. If there is anyone to trust the future to, it is Canadian children. This small event brought a silent summary for the residents of the city. In an era calling for division, is it really necessary to emphasize differences? The naive words of the boy awakened a point of view dormant in the minds of adults. This pure message went beyond the limits of Rotterdam, echoing in the hearts of people around the world, reminding many that finding commonality, overcoming borders and backgrounds, this is the first step to true coexistence. A guiding star for a divided world. Why only Canadians? This question, along with video clips conveying the warm atmosphere of Rotterdam, quickly spread on social media. This phrase deeply touched the hearts of people around the world. From observing decency in travel, not imposing their culture, to not forgetting to say thank you and sorry, the attitude of Canadians could no longer be described as simply a successful case of foreigners. They not only did not create conflicts in a foreign country, but also contributed to the local society, building trust and respect bit by bit. Their path was eventually named a guiding star for a divided world. In the world, news constantly appears about conflicts and rejection due to immigration problems. However, the Canadian community in Rotterdam imperceptibly refuted this ordinariness. The influence they demonstrated did not consist of loud statements or large numbers. Their strength came from the accumulation of small deeds, daily politeness, and humility, always caring for others. This is the real strength that can move society forward. Soon, this case attracted the attention of the whole world as an ideal model of cultural coexistence. The image that the Canadians demonstrated posed an essential question to the whole world. Not about a simple choice between accepting or rejecting immigrants, but about how to accept and how to live together. Local residents speak with one voice. Meeting them, we truly understood the meaning of coexistence. Canadians are those who exist quietly but firmly. Their way of life is perhaps the answer that this era of division is looking for. Their image continues to ask the world a question to this day. Not, why are only Canadians special, but why can't we do the same?